Chapter 13. I came down the stairs in a daze. Prince Henrik was here in Steedsley. He had sat there on his bed, regaling and laughing about how he had fooled the soldiers. And Trey had sat there, flicking Henrik's ear every chance he got. Timothy Easton was flicking Prince Henrik's ear. "What took you so long?" Jane was asking me as I sat down beside her. "And why do you look like you just stepped into the wall?" Lawrence asked. I ignored them both. "Sir John Robert?" He looked up from across the room where he was conversing with my aunt. "Yes?" "I just met Henry." His face went blank. Lady Caroline dropped her embroidery needle. "And did you—" "Poor boy. It must be a royal pain to have the mumps." Sir John Robert barked out a laugh. Yes, I dare say it is." "Really?" Aunt Geraldine said, shocked. "I would hardly call the mumps anything to laugh about. I wish you hadn't gone to see him, Lisbette. You'll have Anne and Jane, who haven't had the mumps, sick in bed now." "No," I said thoughtfully. "Henry's mumps don't seem to be the kind that spread." "Rather a unique strain, you'd say?" Sir John Robert said, chuckling into his fist. "Majestically rare." Both Sir John Robert and Thomas started laughing together. Lady Caroline ducked her head and focused on her embroidery, but I could see her lips twitching. The rest of my family stared in bewilderment at me. "Well, I don't see what's so funny," Uncle William said, applying to his watch. "But the hour has grown late. I think it's time we were off." Sir John Robert and Thomas walked us to our coach, helping hand in the ladies. When it was my turn to climb in, I held Sir John Robert's hand and whispered, "You didn't decide to have a masked ball so that Timothy could come, did you?" "What's that? No, it was for Henrik's sake, of course. Couldn't have the guest of honor locked in his room on the night of his own celebration, now could we?" I gave a great sigh of relief. Of course, how silly of me. He gave my hand a squeeze and whispered, "Never fear. We'll take care so that Timothy is in no danger that night, believe you me. Were you really worried about him?" I was saved from answering by Aunt Geraldine insisting that I come in and close the door to keep the chill out, although I could see he was keen to hear my answer. He handed me into the carriage, closed the door, and waved us goodbye. No sooner than they were out of sight did Aunt Geraldine burst out, "What was the meaning of all that, Lisbeth?" For a moment of fear, I thought they had heard me speaking about Timothy. But before I could utter a sound, Aunt Geraldine continued her scold. "I declare, I felt as if they were laughing at us rather than the boy." Henry. They were still thinking about Henry. "I think the joke was only that the boy was shamming illness to avoid dinner," I said calmly. "But why?" Anne asked. "If you ask me," I said, "it was probably because he heard that Lawrence was going to be there." It was just a jab, but Lawrence surprised us all by demanding, "What did he say? Is he still sulking that I kicked him? It was only in play." I gawked at Lawrence. "You kicked him?" Lawrence glowered out the window. "The annoying little git. He's cheekier than any of them." I was just relishing the thought of Lawrence someday discovering that he had kicked the Crown Prince, when Uncle William said to me, I was not happy to discover that I had been lied to. The atmosphere in the carriage turned chilly. He went on, "You made us all look like fools, especially me. Why didn't you tell me you'd been seen with Timothy in the mountains?" "I didn't think it relevant to anything." "Is there anything else you'd like to clarify? Because if there is, now would be the time to do it. What else have you been keeping back? Ah, yes, you had something to say to me earlier. What was it you wanted to discuss with me this afternoon?" "I think I'd like to open a window," I said as I turned to the glass. "Don't touch the windows," Uncle William ordered. "Confound it, must you always be playing with the windows? Now come, what else have you to report to me?" I folded my hands in my lap and made a special effort to keep them still. "I do have something that I need to talk to you about, but here is not the place." "If it is disagreeable, then I'll warn you to say it now. If you hold it back, like you held back about Timothy Easton, I may be more likely to lose my temper." "Please, Uncle William, wait until we get home. I don't want to discuss anything right now." "Impudent child," Aunt Geraldine said. "Obey your uncle at once." For 2 seconds, my mind raced for something I could confess other than the money. School. I could tell them I'd lost my scholarship. That would surely be enough to put them off for now, and more, it wasn't even a lie. But then I remembered how my father had told Esme one thing and kept back the rest. That half-truth had never cost him a penny, but we were all paying for it now. Was that where I had learned to lie so well and so flawlessly? Had my father taught it to me without ever realizing it? I took a deep breath. In Ottleton, Jarrett was sick. I told him to give me the money and I would go with Clays to the bank. When we got to the bank to pay the taxes, I looked in my purse and the money was gone. I breathed in tremulously. "I lost the money. The taxes haven't been paid." If I hadn't heard the wheels rumbling down the road outside, I would have sworn that time had stopped. There wasn't another sound in the carriage. I licked my lips, held my breath, and waited. I didn't have to wait long. He reached across the carriage, caught my arm, and pulled me toward him. My uncle had never struck me before, but I suppose there's a first time for everything. With one blinding stroke, he boxed my ears, leaving me gasping in pain. "I sold 4 horses, 10 acres, my mother's wedding ring, and my own wife's silver to gather that money." He struck again. I covered my head, cringing from the second blow. "I'm sorry." Sorry? Do you realize what you've done? We have nothing to pay those taxes now, nothing. We'll lose the estate and be homeless by September. Aunt Geraldine wailed. Stop the carriage, Uncle William shouted. Edgar, stop. The carriage came to a hushed standstill. Uncle William leaned over and thrust the door open. Get out. Get out! What? I cried. You heard me. Leave this carriage. I don't care where you go or what you do. You're no kin of mine. No, Uncle William, Jane cried. Please don't, Anne begged. Get out now before I take you by the neck and throw you out. Aunt Geraldine, I begged, please help me. But she was weeping too hard to respond. Father, wait, Lawrence said. She'll go straight back to the Eastons. You can't have them knowing you've disowned her. They'll never speak to us again. He's right, Aunt Geraldine sobbed. What will the neighbors say? Everyone looked at Uncle William's shadowy form and waited. The seconds seemed to turn to minutes before he said, Drive on. The carriage lurched back into motion. Thank you, Uncle William, I said weakly. Silence, I'm not done with you yet. Jane reached over and clutched my hand. I held hers just as tight. I felt ill at the near catastrophe that had been so narrowly avoided. My insides were still reverberating with the sound of Uncle William's shrill voice, and I deserved every ounce of it. At home, Uncle William stormed ahead of us into the house without a word. No sooner than the door had slammed than Jelly and Trudy came running out in hysterics. They burst their way in, Trudy cried. Who? Lawrence asked. The soldiers, Jelly said. They searched the whole house from top to bottom. They even went into poor Mrs. Blackwood's room. Trudy and I did our best to keep them out, but we weren't no match for them. They snatched Trudy's broom and snapped it in two. Then they took my good frying pan from me and threw it out the door. Then they searched everyone's room, touching everything with their dirty Westy hands. It's been all we could do, getting things back in order before you came home. Those dogs, Lawrence said, pushing past Jelly to get into the house. Did they have a warrant? They said they did, and they waved a piece of paper at us, but we couldn't see it properly, Jelly answered. We followed Lawrence inside. Glancing fearfully up the stairs, Jane asked, Is Mother all right? Jelly dabbed her eyes with the hem of her apron. We gave her a sleeping drop. I think she was a bit frightened, you folks being gone and all, but she's resting now, quiet as a kitten. Jelly then turned to Trudy. Come on, lamb, back to work. We'll be up till midnight getting that kitchen back in order. Behind us, following slowly, Aunt Geraldine moaned. The world is turned upside down. This must be the end. Don't blame yourself, Mother, Lawrence said, returning from the adjoining room. All of this is Lisbette's fault. They would never have ransacked the house if she hadn't been seen with Timothy in the mountains. Yes, she said darkly. Her face was mottled and swollen from crying, but rage seemed to have overtaken the grief.